Okay, let's go ahead and get started. First of all, if we could have the Pledge of Allegiance. Everyone would please stand.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Ms. Reading, if you would take the roll call. Here? Here?
Here.
Next is approval of the agenda. Are there any changes that need to be made to the agenda? Any questions on the agenda?
Move to approve the agenda as presented.
Second. Okay, all in favor? Say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. And did everyone have a chance to look at last month's minutes from November 6th? Anyone have any questions or any changes or edits to the minutes? Okay. If not, do we have a motion to approve?
Move to adopt the minutes as presented.
Second. Okay. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Okay. And we have no old business, and we have no public hearings this evening. Under new business, we do need to discuss the election of a new vice chair. Commissioner Peralt last month, and so we kind of made that announcement that was coming up. Anyone here like to nominate anyone?
Yeah, I'd like to nominate Nick.
Okay. Anyone else want to?
Move the nomination cease.
Okay. All in favor? Say aye.
Aye.
Okay. Well, if Commissioner Seidel shows up, and I bet he will, you know the good news. All right. This evening we have a community forum on the new bicycle plan, and just wanted to let everyone, first of all, thank you very much for attending. Last week, we're going to have it last month, and because it was the day of voting, nobody was here. We had one person here, and so we thought it might be best to put it off, and we could actually get more people to not only show up, but I'm sure more people are watching also on CATS. Not being the voting evening. So there will be a presentation. After the presentation, everyone is welcome to come up and either ask questions or make comments. We would ask, though, that you do please approach the podium so that you can be on the mic for the people in the TV audience to be able to hear you. And so if you do want to come up and say something afterwards or ask some questions, come up, give your name, and we also would ask that people always limit to about 5 minutes or less, please. So, okay, and with that, then, Mr. Coates, if you want to go ahead and do your presentation.
Thank you, Madam Chair, Commissioners. Forgive my voice, I'm losing it tonight, and the length of my presentation was geared to having a full voice, so I might have to quit her. We'll see. But thank you very much for this opportunity to present the draft Bicycle Routes Master Plan. This plan has been in a work in progress for over a year now, and several of the folks who are instrumental in helping push it along, as well as in the original planning stages, are here tonight, and I appreciate all of you guys. Thank you very much. The purposes of the Bicycle Routes Master Plan is to improve the safety for bicyclists, residents, and visitors. It's to decrease bicyclists and motorist conflicts, encourage bicycling for health, transportation, and recreation, connect neighborhoods, link identified destination, and establish priorities for roadway and street infrastructure improvements, as well as enhance environmental sustainability. As one of the comments we've received, the primary goal, of course, is to improve safety for bicyclists. This is a bicycling town. US 180 is a New Mexico designated bicycle route between Deming and Cliff. We have 4 good riding seasons, and the Silver City area is becoming known because of the Tour of the Gila. Every year is attracting racers from all over the world, and their entourages and spectators, and it's really become a mecca for road biking because of the Tour of the Gila and just the amenities that the area offers to people who are recreational cyclists. The plan has, like I said, has been in development stage for over a year. We were first asked by the mayor and the council to prepare a bicyclist and pedestrian routes master plan, and it was to be used for future infrastructure planning to enhance neighborhood connectivity and linkages between destinations. We formed a citizen task force to assist in gathering information and developing the plan. Community information about walking, biking, and destination data was solicited from 5 neighborhood gatherings and 2 local high schools through surveys and public meetings. The routes proposed are based on the destination maps, existing bicycle improvements, and future projects and linkages. Priorities proposed were from the survey information, other communities, and national standards. And the draft plan was given to a task force for review and comment on November 5th. The draft plan is being presented to the community tonight, and we plan on revising the plan based on public comments and adding additional language. The plan as drafted right now is basically skeletal. It is showing the routes which form the framework of the plan rather than being the entire plan itself. So it will be revised based on comments as necessary, and also additional language in sections and introduction. It'll be a lot wordier than what has been drafted so far. I hate to say that, but we recognize that. The bicycle routes plan will be incorporated into the pedestrian routes plan that we presented to you in October, and then the revised larger plan will be presented to the public again, and I'm hoping that the commission will invite us back for another community forum at which we can present the entire plan to you and the rest of the community prior to then taking it to the council for its consideration, review, and hopefully approval. Part of the initial data gathering was a walking and biking questionnaire that we did through the 5 public gatherings and the 2 high schools. We received 200 surveys that were completed. Out of, 143 of those, or 67%, reported walking regularly or biking regularly in Silver City. The data is all the same as what we presented to you about the pedestrian plan. It was the survey was about walking and bicycling. The major impediment to bicycling and walking that was mentioned in the survey was the intersection of 180 and New Mexico 90, and that's shown to be an obstacle to connectivity in the community about both walking and bicycling. Part of the 5 meetings and the high schools were to generate destination data, and what each meeting, the participants in each meeting placed dots based on where they live, where they like to go, where they drive, where they would walk or ride their bikes to. And from that information, we were able to gather the destination data, that at least that's what we call it, and compile it into an overall map of where people like to go with walking and bicycling, where they're walking and bicycling from. And we did the data compilation and put together then a map showing the variety of destinations that people are looking for. Primarily, people were going downtown or shopping or to see doctors or to school. And we also incorporated bus stops into destinations so that there could be an intermodal factor within the plan, and we also looked at parks and open spaces as places where people like to walk and bike too. The routes and the destinations then form the basis for the framework for connectivity, which is the skeletal plan that we're talking about tonight of proposed routes that would make it easier for bicyclists to get from one part of town to another. And it creates a system of roadways and streets, connecting neighborhoods and destinations, maximizes limited resources within the constraints of historical, topological, and other problematic conditions. And it's not a proposal for complete streets. It attempts to meet the connectivity needs of the town's bicyclists within the context of current conditions and future opportunities on roadways and streets. Silver City already has a fairly extensive bicycle infrastructure. The photograph on the wall right now is showing Hudson Street, or New Mexico 90, that has bicycle lanes on both sides. A bit of a sidebar on this. Recently, the New Mexico Highway Department, which owns and operates New Mexico 90, or Hudson Street, did a restriping job on the road through town, and their bicycle lanes ended up not meeting the standards that are set for the bicycle or highway designers by the Association of Municipal and State and Highway Engineers, the AASHTO guide. The mayor contacted the district engineer for the New Mexico Highway Department and let him know that they weren't suitable, the lanes as striped, and they came back, took up the old stripes and repainted new stripes, making them then 3 foot from the gutter pan, which is what AASHTO standards recognize, giving then a 2 foot gutter pan. But had they striped it according to town criteria, that would be a 4 foot wide from the gutter pan. But AASHTO is what rules New Mexico Department of Transportation and not the town guidelines. Hopefully next time they restripe down Hudson or anywhere else, they will consider that the town has a 4 foot wide bike lane requirement on its town streets and roadways. Bicycle routes are broken into several designations for the town within our draft plan, and it forms a network of roadways within Silver City. And I'm going to mention right now that the routes are based on roadways and streets. They're not based on other places. So that's the framework that the council asked us to work within to design routes that are based on roadways and streets. And standards for the plan, if it is adopted, would include the American Association of State Highway and Transportation Officials Guide for the Development of Bicycle Facilities, the Federal Highway Administration Manual on Uniform Traffic Control Devices for Streets and Highways, the National Association of City Transportation Officials, Transportation Engineers, and the more stringent town standards on bicycle routes, master plan, or other town codes. And the town code that that's referring to is the Land Use Code does require a 4 foot bicycle lane on cities, or the town streets and roadways. Specific standards associated with the various routes that we're going to look at are, there's routes designated as bike lanes There's routes that are designated as signed shared roadways. There are off-street bicycle or multi-use paths. And then we'll look at some future opportunities. Let's keep in mind, though, that most bicycling, both in Silver City and nationally, and probably internationally, occurs on local streets that are shared roadways with no bikeway or bike lane or share the road designations. They are local streets where we all learned to ride our bicycles when we were younger, and at times were a little bit more simple. And hopefully kids are learning to ride in those less crowded, congested areas today, and will continue to then expand their knowledge base and skill levels by learning to ride then on more congested city streets. The Bicycle Routes Master Plan, as it's drafted, the map that's on the wall now shows those various designations. There's bike lanes, signed shared roadways, off-road multi-use paths, and future opportunities. Different colors. The red is the bike lanes, and they would include US 180. Let's see, I'm having trouble seeing the map here, so US 180 and New Mexico 90, New Mexico 15, Swan Street south of 32nd Street north of US 180, Little Walnut Road south of Kane Drive, 32nd Street east of Swan Street included 32nd Street bypass, Pope Street south of 14th and north of College Street, Swan Street south of 180 to 12th Street, and Silver Street south of 32nd to US 180. And I think everyone has the color map in front of them showing the various types of routes. And for the bicycle lanes, those that we just mentioned, they'll be subject to the standards in the Town of Silver City Land Use Code, and they're not required on all local streets, but they are required on arterial streets. Bicycle lanes are required on certain collector streets being the lesser of the roadways in town, the arterials being 180, 90, those larger, more congested streets. And they shall generally be located on both sides of the street or roadway wherever called for in a bicycle master's plan. The minimum width in a roadway is 4 feet, not including gutter or vehicular parking area. Bicycle route guide signage will be on the streets and pavement markings in the bike lanes showing that that's a designated bike lane. The next standard for or designated route type or the bike or the let's see, I'm getting mixed up here. Sorry about that. Trying to rush through it. Here's a few pictures of bike lanes that are currently in use in Silver City, and they're between 32nd Street and US 180. They are no parking areas on that street, and the bike lanes are fairly wide and relatively well marked. I think that the Public Works Department has done a very good job of working on the streets and the bike facilities that they already have put in place. Then we have next for designation, let's go to Pope Street is another area that has bike lanes and non-bike lanes on it. The area when you first come down from 14th Street approaching 13th Street is a shared bike roadway, and that there I'm pointing right now at what we call a sharrow, which is a pavement marking saying that that road is a share the road area for motorists and bicyclists, that they're not being asked to stay in a lane. They are actually asked to be as courteous as the motorists are, and work together in the roadway. As Pope Street goes towards 12th Street, there becomes a bike lane on the side of the road, and bicyclists that choose to use that lane can follow the lane, and it then goes towards the intersection of 12th Street, and you can see a dotted line that doesn't necessarily end the lane, but it creates a traffic signal in the sense for automobiles and bicyclists both to know that the automobiles can be changing lanes there so that it can go into a right-hand lane, and possibly the bicyclists might be changing lanes there to go over into a left-hand turn lane. So the dotted line is a designation that the bike lane is still there, but it's not necessarily just for the bikes right there. Then you can see that dotted line continues on to the intersection where you have a right-hand turn lane for vehicles, you have a bike lane that goes straight, and then you have a traffic lane that goes straight and another one over to the left for a left-hand turn lane. It can be confusing where bike lanes and automobile lanes come together at intersections, especially because folks don't always know which way to proceed. One of the problems that we have with designing bicycle facilities is making sure that everyone understands the language of the road and what the rules of the road are going to be. So that's something we want to discuss in a few minutes. Then we have the next designation of routes are those that are signed shared roadways. Then these would be marked with share the road signage, share the road pavement markings. It could be a sharrow or other types of markings, and then bicycle route guide signage. All of the routes that we're proposing, we would ask that there be bicycle route guide signage designating those areas for visitors and people who are aware of the area to know that those are they're designated routes that people will get more used to seeing more bicycles on. And the signed shared roadways that we're proposing will be Cooper Street from Market Street to New Mexico 90, and Market Street from Cooper to US 180, Broadway from Swan to Cooper Streets, 12th Street from Gold to Mississippi Streets, Alabama Street from 12th to Hester Streets, Grant Street from 12th Street to US 180, Mountain View south of 10th Street, Durango Canal 17th and Gold Street south of US 180 to College Street, Pine Street, Ranch Club Road from New Mexico 15 to US 180, 41st Street from Swan to Silver, 40th Street from Silver to Fowler, Fowler Street from 40th to 32nd, Hill Street, and Virginia Street from Hill Street to the Botanical Gardens. These will all be signed shared roadways, where there won't be bicycle lanes, but people will be expected to share the roadway, and there will be signage indicating that. In Silver, currently there are a number of signed shared roadways, such as Swan Street between town limits and 32nd Street. It already has the signage, share the road, as you can see on the speed limit and children safety sign. And then Silver Street between Pine Street and US 180 is proposed for bike lanes if on-street parking can be eliminated. Right now, there's some concern that the on-street parking does not allow enough room for a bike lane, though we're hoping that we can convince the powers that be that there is room for that and not as much need for the on-street parking, because a quick survey of that area, you find that most of the residential houses through there have their own off-street parking, as they are required to do anyway, by the zoning code, and it would make for a very broad area with traffic, less traffic congestion, and possibly less speed on that roadway if we could have a wide bicycle lane and make that more of a thoroughfare for multi-use rather than just parked cars and higher speed vehicles. Sure, we also have a picture here. If you aren't familiar with Sharrows, this is one painted by an advocacy group on 41st Street, just before you get to Swan Street. And what that does is lets motorists and bicyclists both know that the road is designated as a bicycle route, but there's not a bicycle lane there, and that you need to be sharing the road courteously and safely. It's a standard marking that is being used now nationally and internationally, and one that has been used recently in the county, and we plan on proposing that as part of our changes to the pavement markings for the signed shared roadways routes. Then we also have a designation of an off-street multi-use path, and the standards would be subject to the standards in the land use code, which are at least 10 feet wide and suitable as multi-use paths for pedestrians and bicyclists, and on rural collector streets and urban or rural arterial streets, one off-street bicycle path of 10 feet may be provided to satisfy the bicycle lane requirement wherever called for in the bicycle routes plan, preferable along primary arterials wherever possible, and signage to indicate uses and route guidance. We have a couple of areas that we are proposing. Sorry about that. Proposing for off-street multi-use path routes, and that would be the path and bridge from Virginia Street to Little Walnut, Kane Drive east of Little Walnut and west of Swan where the right-of-way allows, and that we considered for the multi-use path because it has a fairly wide right-of-way. It's owned by the town, and it's a non-curbed and guttered roadway, and probably won't become such, and a multi-use path would fit within that area of the right-of-way through most of it, as long as drainage and other topographical issues can be worked out. And prior to development of the multi-use path, Kane Drive will be treated as a signed shared roadway. Another element of the off-street multi-use paths is it's still following roadways. We're not looking at creating new areas for this route plan that are going to be new trails. What we're looking at is ways of incorporating that multi-use path within already designated bicycle routes. And so those two areas would be Kane Drive and the short section where the new Jose Barrios Bridge went in between Virginia Street and Little Walnut. This is a photograph of Kane Road, trying to show and indicate how wide that right-of-way is and how nice of an actual multi-use path it could be built there. And we would like to see it also be there because there's a lot of walkers and bicyclists already using that road. The road is narrow, not enough room for a bike lane, but an off-road trail would be safe and convenient for not only the neighborhood, but for the people who use that as part of what's been termed the inner loop bicycle trail or bicycle path. We also have some opportunities coming up that I'd like to share with you. The Ursa Minor is an area between Silver Heights and Little Walnut Road that is relatively undeveloped. Oh, thank you, Peter. Wow. That was kind. Excuse me. It is already a planned subdivision, or it's platted subdivision, and there's renewed interest in developing it more fully, at which time the town's land use code would require that it be developed with sidewalks and bicycle facilities. So that's a nice opportunity that hopefully will come up sooner than later, and that will actually link two major areas of town that right now are a long way apart, except unless you're a bird. And then the other area is US 180 from Swan to Grant Street, and let's see, that would be after implementation by New Mexico DOT of intermediate and or long-term recommendations that we're proposing as remediation of a problem area. The blue lines there are what we're showing as potential opportunities coming up in the future. I'm hoping that neither one of them are that far away in the future, but we'll see as time goes by. I'm going to mention another quick opportunity right now, which, though we have it as, we have both of these areas as designated routes, both with bike lanes and pedestrian facilities. Both of them are owned by New Mexico Department of Transportation. One is Pinos Altos Road, or New Mexico 15, from US 180 to 32nd Street, and the other is Hudson Street Overpass, or New Mexico 90 Overpass on Hudson Street, both of which are slated for reconstruction in the very near future. Scoping is about to begin for the Pinos Altos Road, scoping being when the engineers start receiving public comments to determine what the public would like to see happen. The Hudson Street Bridge construction, the engineer working with public process is going to be in town next week on the 6th, or no, excuse me, on the 12th at 6 here in this room to present information about the Hudson Street Bridge reconstruction, and they have said that they are planning on making that bridge much more suitable for bicyclists and pedestrians at the time of reconstruction. There's also some other issues involved for pedestrians with the San Vicente Trail, that the trailhead is below the bridge, and we want to make sure that that trailhead is preserved during the construction and beyond. So just letting you know now that that is a meeting that's coming up next week on Wednesday evening at 6 here in this room to discuss the Hudson Street Bridge. So if you're interested in the projects, now's the time to start and stay involved. Bicycle racks are another facility that the plan addresses. We hope to encourage not only the town at all of its buildings to have adequate bicycle racks to encourage more bicycle riders, but also to encourage other destinations that the public wants to bicycle to, such as say, the hospital, the New Mexico State buildings on Highway 30, or on 32nd Street bypass, those are, any of the parks, open spaces. Part of the plan is to encourage the development of bicycle facilities like the bike racks. This is a picture of the bike rack at the Silver City Annex building at the bank. It gets used relatively often by mainly town employees, but I did see a bank customer come in the other day, chained his bike up to a sign in front of the building, and I mentioned to him, there's a bike rack over there, and it's shady and covered, and, oh, I've been doing this for years, it's okay. So I think that just, making sure that people know about these facilities and that they are there would be helpful for bicyclists. Let's see. I mentioned earlier that there are some areas of special concern, and one of all of those areas basically are right around the intersection of US 180 and New Mexico 90 or Hudson Street, and it's centered between the intersection of 180 with Swan Street and 14th Street. It's an area of approximately almost a half a mile, 2,000 plus feet, and it's congested because of the intersection at the two highways, and it's also somewhat confusing because they come into at different angles, and it's for bicyclists it is a part of a route to Deming, or between Deming and Cliff, and the route passes both east and west, and has wide shoulders or bike lanes everywhere except during that stretch, or in that stretch of highway, and it becomes confusing, hazardous, and it's an area of concern for us. That's one of the reasons why it's not labeled as a bike route right now. We have it as a future possibility, rather than as one that we are encouraging people to use right now. We would rather route people around that intersection than say, this is a great place to ride, because it's not. I think anybody who has tried riding it knows that it's not a great place to ride. Ownership by New Mexico Department of Transportation of US 180 and Highway 90 or Highway 90 or Hudson Street complicates the issue tremendously. It's not something that the town can just say, this is what we're going to do here. The New Mexico Transportation Department has to do it all, basically, with as much input as we can give them, and encouragement and advice to make things happen differently. The intersection is confusing. The bike lane ends sign is approximately 200 feet from the end of the lane, with no this is coming at it from the eastern side. With no previous or further warning to bicyclists or motorists. The sign is surrounded by other directional and informational signage, tall vegetation, and ever-present traffic. It's a difficult intersection to negotiate, both as a motorist and as a bicyclist, and as we talked about before, as a pedestrian. Westbound, and that's looking westbound there, is difficult because the lane ends, and it share the road signage and markings are intended mitigation for narrowing road and loss of bike lanes, but it doesn't, there's not enough forewarning, and the section between New Mexico 90 and 14th Street, which is down the hill beyond Sun Valley Hardware, is narrow, and not wide enough for bike lanes the way the traffic lanes are configured. There's only one advanced warning sign and no advanced warning signs for westbound bike riders or motorists to transition from bike lanes to share the road condition. And the section is between two of the busiest intersections in Silver. It's an abrupt end to the westbound bicycle lane on US 180, and they have little notice of the change from bike lanes east of the intersection to share the road beyond it. This is beyond the intersection. As you're starting down the hill, you notice that not very far from the intersection, the bike lane just ends. There's a share the road sign right where it ends, and that's the basic warning that motorists and bicycles have for that area. Coming from the east, or coming from the west towards the east, is not much better. You're at the bottom of a hill approaching US 180, or approaching on US 180 from a fairly wide bike lane, and all of a sudden you're faced with making a left turn with no indication that the bike lane is actually a bike lane at that point. I know that both on a bike and in a vehicle, it gets confusing as to can you turn right from that lane? Is that a right-hand turn lane, or is that a bike lane or a parking lane? There's no indication that the bike needs to make a turn there. All of a sudden, you're just forced to make a left turn to continue on Highway 180, at which time you're faced with a fairly steep uphill and no warning that it's a share the road situation after being in a bike lane for the last 60 or 30 miles anyway from Cliff. And it's necessary to actually slow down, because you're starting from a stop if you hit the light wrong, and you're going up a very steep hill, and you're in a lane of traffic, the inside of which is possibly going to be turning left out of that lane across traffic into a entrance into the shopping plaza there, or you're in the one lane on the right or the outside lane, and you're going slow, sharing the road, and there's traffic whizzing by, hopefully safely. I have been almost run over in that section and decided not to ride uphill there anymore. It's a busy highway. It's with a constricted width, and the slow bicycle takes up one of two very narrow lanes. So it is also an area of special concern for us. Let's see. So the intersection creates confusions and hazards. The area on either side of the intersection on US 180 creates confusion and hazards. Therefore, we do not recommend turning that into a designated route at this time. Our long-term recommendation for that is to reconfigure the intersection to make it less hazardous for bicyclists, pedestrians, and motorists. There have been plans in the past to turn it into somewhat of a traffic circle, or a modified traffic circle that would be 2 or 3 blocks long and triangular, but rather than having traffic going in all directions at each one of the intersections. But we'll see where that goes, but in the meantime, we're not proposing to make that part of our route system. The next factor in our draft plan is an educational one, and the safety of all bicyclists is a primary goal. The awareness of the rights and responsibilities of operating a vehicle on public roadways is tantamount to creating that safety factor, and those rights and responsibilities of operating a vehicle include both the motorist and the bicyclist. We want to encourage courteous and lawful behavior on all vehicular parts, and we want to enhance the skill level of bicyclists, increase motorist awareness, create cooperative partnerships among interest groups and organizations, and we'll look at target audiences for the education program being young bicyclists, parents of young bicyclists, adult bicyclists, motorists, law enforcement, and street and roadway planners and engineers. All of those are people who are involved with making a bicycle route plan work, and we want to make sure that the educational component is there. The implementation of the plan would be the design of bicycle improvements with associated costs necessary to implement Bicycle Routes Master Plan, the annual evaluation of routes to prioritize funding available for individual or multiple projects, and that would be an evaluation tool based on local needs and funding source priorities. Multiple projects may be included in annual planning based on size, resource requirements, and route priority. And continued coordination with New Mexico DOT, Southwest Regional Planning Organization, and bicycling advocates, and other agencies that are concerned with transportation planning. That could be the county, the school districts, regional municipalities. Project-by-project completion of routes with complementary maintenance and repair. Posted and printed information about bicycle routes and safe, responsible bicycling, and posted and printed information might be route maps, brochures about bicycling in Silver City, online information about where and how to get to where you need to go when you get to Silver City on your bicycle. We have a number of national and international bicyclists that tour through Silver City every year, and we want to make sure that there's a way for them to get to know Silver City's bicycle facilities as well. And then coordination of education and public awareness programs. The pending opportunities I've already discussed. We have the Pinos Altos Road and Hudson Street Bridge. Those projects are coming up. The funding is already out there for them. They're in design phase and coming into the public scoping process component. Stay involved, get involved. Anybody who has some ideas and suggestions about how to make those two areas better for bicyclists, pedestrians, and motorists. There are some, the people who are designing them need to hear from you. There are some problem areas on especially Pinos Altos Road, where Pine and Pinos Altos Road and Ranch Club Road come together. You know, that's been already identified as a potential area for how to design this properly. And when I talked with the engineer, he even mentioned that. And people who live in those neighborhoods have mentioned that particular corner as a difficult one, and we're going to need to hear from as many people as we can with ideas and suggestions of how to make that a better and safer intersection, and also a better and safer route for bicyclists and pedestrians. You know, since we're planning on doing this presentation last month, and we only had one person show up. Thank you, Michelle. We made sure that we got the word out. Michelle helped a lot with that. John, the commissioner, I can't even remember your last name, sorry about that, has helped put together a promotional package for the meeting tonight, and I want to thank everyone that helped. But we've also received a lot of comments already, and I wanted to go through some of the representative comments and a response to some of them, so that you'll know what we're having to think about as we get deeper and deeper into this process. We've had a question like, how much will it cost? Well, we don't know yet. But that's one of the facets of the plan that we need to put together prior to taking it to the council. And what we're going to be looking at are the primary costs of signs, pavement marking, signage, and then how to allocate those costs over time, with the total cost being spread over the years as the route system is implemented and maintained. Another question was, how does the bike plan interface with the pedestrian plan? And because it was initiated simultaneously by the mayor and town council, the plans will be melded into one routes master plan for presentation to the council. Preliminary planning of the process and developing of the plan components was accomplished together. The basic purpose of connectivity for non-motorized transportation is the same for both pedestrians and the bicyclists. Similar destination data systems data was used in the routes development process, and many, though not all, of the routes actually overlap. Another question that we've had, not necessarily in these words, but in comments that we've received, we recognize that there might be some confusion or misunderstanding about what is the draft plan. And the draft plan is a draft. It's incomplete as it stands. The routes are the plan's framework and called for preliminary public review, which is what we're doing this evening, and what we've done with the promotion of this community forum, as well as getting the plan out to as many people as possible. It's on this town's website, and with a comments section that people can use their computer through their internet to comment on the plan, or they can write and call us. Additional language and sections will be added prior to a final draft being presented for approval. That's the verbiage I mentioned, the increased language and bulk of the plan. But I want to just say that it's the flesh on the bones of the route. The skeleton of the plan will be the routes. The public will have another opportunity to review the final draft proposal of the Bicycle Routes Master Plan after it's melded together, and we hope, like I said earlier, we can have another community forum where the two plans are brought to the community again. As requested by the mayor and council, the draft is a plan for bicycle routes on roadways and streets in this town of Silver City. The draft plan provides guidance for the town's infrastructure planners, designers, and funding sources when considering improvement of roadways and streets to more safely accommodate bicyclists. The draft bicycle and pedestrian routes master plan is an important step in the long-term acceptance and implementation of strategies that recognize the equality, importance of all transportation modes in the community. It's not the end-all of bicycle planning. It's not the end-all of pedestrian planning, but it is an important step, and it's one that many people have been working towards for many years, and we're glad that we're getting this far already. The draft plan can provide better coordination and planning between and among Silver City and other agencies, which could include county, regional, municipalities, school districts, the regional planning organization, which is the transportation organization, and then the state. So that's what it is. What it isn't. It's, as I mentioned earlier, it's not a complete streets proposal or a plan. Complete streets proposal or plan is generally considered to be a vision statement about political, policy, and procedural changes to the way transportation agencies and communities approach every street project. This, as the council asked, is a routes plan. It's not a complete streets proposal, meaning it's not a policy shift or change. It is mainly, they say, we need to start looking at these issues, and this is the way we want to start. It's the first step. The draft plan is not a bicycle master plan. It is a routes master plan, not a bicycle master plan for the community. These are generally considered to be far more encompassing and can include such broader goals as the Santa Fe Metropolitan Bicycle Plan says to coordinate investments in trails and roads, establish common guidelines for design, construction, and maintenance, develop shared strategies on education, enforcement, and encouragement of bicycling as a transportation choice in the Santa Fe area. That was put together by the Santa Fe Metropolitan Planning Organization for the town, or for the city and the county. It was just adopted in April of this year. The town's goal, or it's not like the Taos Bicycle Master Plan, which in it, the town's goal for the master plan is to receive an award as a bicycle-friendly community by the League of American Bicyclists. Accordingly, the master plan includes several policies to be carried out in pursuit of this goal. Each policy is intended to give direction and focus to the town when making decisions about how to become a bicycle-friendly community. Policies are organized around planning, design, parking, funding, maintenance, enforcement, and education and encouragement. Though a very laudable goal to become a bicycle-friendly community, our bicycle routes master plan that's not the goal. The goal is to start the process with routes and proceed from there. The draft plan is not a safe routes to schools plan, but it can provide an overlay for the basis of coordination and implementation of such a plan as it develops in coordination with the school district or the school districts, depending on where we're at. The draft plan is not a trails or off-road plan. It is about streets and roadways. Another question is, do bicyclists need their own bikeways or lanes? There's a train of thought that is bicyclists don't need bike lanes, don't need bike roadways or bike facilities, that they have an equal responsibility to be on the highway, the equal right and responsibility to be on any of the streets and roadways, and that is actually safer, according to this theory, that it's safer than to have bike lanes. The final decision on whether it's safer or not is still out. Studies that I've read, at least, offer conflicting results. This theory is one promulgated primarily, or at least for the most well-known of the promulgators is a fellow by the name of John Forrester, and it's called vehicular cycling. I'd never heard of it before. I started this planning. I talked with at least one proponent of it, and it makes a lot of sense to me as a bicyclist, but it also isn't what most people come to expect of bicycling. Bicycle lanes seem to encourage some people who might be afraid of riding a bicycle on public highways or streets. They feel safer on a bike lane. So there's that conflict of thought or philosophies about what kind of riding you want to do, whether you want to be a bike roadway or bikeway rider or a vehicular cyclist. Vehicular cyclists maintain that bicyclists have as much right to be on the roadways, are responsible for following the same laws as motorists, and are responsible for their own safety. With adequate and appropriate training of all vehicle operators, motor vehicle and bicyclists, vehicular cyclists see no need for special designations of where to ride on a public street. Vehicular cyclists believe that cyclists should operate on the roadway according to the rules of the road for drivers of all vehicles. Vehicular cyclists value the welfare of cyclists by advocating the system that best allows them to travel by bicycle with reasonable safety and convenience. As long as they are not restricted to the use of bikeways, bike lanes, vehicular cyclists can accept the desire for such facilities by other bicyclists. The plan, as presented or drafted, calls for bikeways and lanes for those who feel more comfortable within that system. But the plan does not call for more restrictive laws limiting bicyclists from where they want to ride. and that seems to be the major sticking point, from what I understand, between bikeway riders and vehicular cyclists. I'm hoping I'm doing that argument justice. Maybe we'll find out later. But I wanted to at least mention that I'm trying to see within the draft both sides of that coin. There's bicyclists that feel better in a bike lane, bicyclists that feel better without the bike lane. So, another comment that we received is speeders create additional hazards for bicyclists and pedestrians on certain streets along the routes. This is from a person who lives on College Street and said that the law enforcement was not enforcing speeding, and so therefore having a bike route or a pedestrian route along College Street, you're going to have more accidents anyway. My recommendation or comment or response to that comment is that if laws are being violated, whether there's a bike lane or a pedestrian path, that whoever notices it should be reported to the law enforcement, and that we need to increase training and awareness for law enforcement and motorists to make sure that they understand that bicyclists and pedestrians might be using these routes, and that we need to consider those issues as well as just the routes themselves. Bike laws, rights, and responsibilities are not understood by all transportation users. I've heard that from motorists. I've heard it from bicyclists. I've heard that motorists say that bicyclists don't stop, don't stop at stop signs, don't follow the laws, don't stay in their lanes, da da da. I've heard from bicyclists that motorists don't consider the safety of the bicyclists and don't give them the same rights to the road as they are by law equal to. I see both of those sides as being valid. As a bicyclist, I've been almost run over by cars. I've been yelled at by people telling me I needed to move over off the lane that had a Sharrow in it. But I've also been, I've almost run into people on bicycles who go right through a stop sign, never even slow down. I was walking out the door of the office one day when one of those well-trained Lycra-suited bicyclists on the sidewalk almost ran into me as I was walking out the door of the office because they were on the sidewalk riding their bicycle. So I see both sides of us, and I include myself as a motorist and a bicyclist, as being guilty of not always thinking in terms of both sides of the coin and trying to always be safe and courteous for bicyclists and motorists. So bicyclists and motorists have the same rights and responsibilities on public roadways and must follow the same laws. Law enforcement, motorists, and bicyclists all need increased awareness and education to operate safely, courteously, and with no surprises. The surprises are what can kill a bicycle real quick, or kill a bicyclist, and within the constraints of the existing system. And it's not just the surprises that from the motorists, it's also the other direction. Bicycle training needs to begin at an early age, including skills and responsibilities, and this can be done through formal programs. It should begin in the family. As soon as a kid can get on a bicycle and you're letting your child go, they should be getting some training. And any amendment of laws to make bicyclists not responsible for the same laws as motorists is a state issue, not one addressed in the plan. Another question we had was that a 4-foot bike lane does not appear to be safe or adequate. And the town's land use code calls for a minimum of 4-foot bike lanes, not including the gutter, which exceeds AASHTO standards from most areas. The draft plan calls for utilizing AASHTO guidelines for any areas that call for a more stringent design than provided for by town codes. That could be where AASHTO requires 5 foot outside of a parking lane where the town is only requiring 4. We would propose that the AASHTO guideline that is more stringent be required there. And additional alternative routes that include pedestrian and bicycle-only connectors to limit incidents of conflict between automobiles, bicycles, and pedestrians. The routes plan, again, is for town streets and roadways, not for private property. One of the connectors that was suggested was to avoid using the Juniper 180-90 intersection is to go through some private property, a little bit of a hill stretch, and into the U-Haul parking lot, through the parking lot of the shopping plaza there, and back behind the hardware store. That is a well-used bicycle route already. It's informal, but we can't recommend it because it's not on town property. It is private property. So, though, as a person, I would recommend doing that because I do it myself, but as a town planner and presenting a bicycle plan to the council, I couldn't recommend taking a route and through private property and saying that it's the town's route. Potential off-street connectors are limited to town-owned properties and will be considered for inclusion where feasible. One of these that was suggested was at the end of, the north end of Yucca Street, the end of the street is a right-of-way that connects then with Royal Street. It's right-of-way. It is town-owned property, though not really a street, but it also goes through an arroyo. That's one that was suggested and one that we would need to consider more closely due to terrain, the cost and liability of building a trail that would meet the standards and that would be feasible for the town to maintain in an arroyo. Final proposed plan, though, will include a mandatory language. That was one of the concerns brought up by one of the comments, is that as we progress in our evolution as a town and providing bicycle facilities, we need to make sure that the council can see ways that it might amend the plan, add to it, change it, add routes, that sort of thing. So we want to make sure that there is a mandatory language that we can include routes as they come up. If the next section there is the full development of the Silver Greenways project, it's not included in the route plan because, one, it's not on a street and roadway, and as it progresses, if and when it is passed and implemented, if there becomes a multi-use trail through there, I would certainly recommend that the council would include it in the routes plan. But until then, it's not on town property, and it's not considered a town asset, as it were. So that basically concludes my long-winded presentation. Sorry I took so much time tonight. Thank you for your interest and participation, and together we can move forward. I'm going to leave this slide up because of I would hope that our TV audience will be able to see that they are able to contact us at the Town of Silver City, 575-534-6374, or jcoates@silvercitymail.com, and also that the draft plan is on the town's website, www.silvercity.com or townofsilvercity.com, and there's a or .org, excuse me. Thank you. It's a favorite. I don't need to remember it. So thank you very much. I appreciate it. I'm hoping that we can hear lots of good comments from the folks who came out tonight. I appreciate it.
I have just a quick question
Sure.
for you. Earlier, you had mentioned that the engineer will be next Wednesday here at 6 o'clock discussing the Hudson Bridge, but you'd also implied that Pinos Altos was going to happen before Hudson Bridge. Is it the same engineers, and if people want to have comments on the Pinos Altos project, is that an appropriate time, or is there going to be another one on that?
It'll be separate engineering firms, separate folks designing, constructing, that sort of thing. The Hudson Street Bridge, the engineer is already planned a meeting, public meeting, next Wednesday. The scoping process for Pinos Altos Road is just getting started. They're starting to put together a group to talk about some of the issues, and from that, it will go into more of a public process. So we can watch for that and stay in tune with what's going to go on, but the Hudson Street Bridge is happening next week.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
I don't know. I have scads of things I'd like to talk to you about, but I feel like the folks that are waiting out in the audience, maybe we ought to hear from them, and then I'll bring up their ear or something.
Sure. That's all right with the commissioners?
Again, I'll ask anybody who wants to come up and speak to please come to the podium so that people who are, the TV audience can hear you, and give your name. And again, we're trying to keep all questions, presentations, etc., limited to 5 minutes or less. So if there's anyone who has anything to say, ask. You're welcome to come up now.
Hi, everybody. My name is Andrew Teagarden. I am a coordinator for Safe Routes to School. Silver Consolidated School got a grant. I'm one of the coordinators of that grant. So that, and I also work at the Gila Hike and Bike. My girlfriend's Dutch. I don't know if you know about the Dutch bicycling network, but it's impressive. They have train stations with bike parking lots that are double-decker, and they have a taxi that comes and picks you up from your bike, taking you to the station. Pretty impressive. So, yeah, this plan is definitely a plus, especially the Little Walnut bike lane proposal. Is it bike lanes or just added to the route? That Little Walnut to Kane Street will be improved, but, well, regardless, that is a plus. It's mentioned in the draft plan, definitely a plus, as is talk of the Highway 90, 180 sort of traffic redesignation, as it were. Whatever it is, it's got to be an improvement. Hopefully, it's something like a roundabout. So, yeah, I mean, I obviously would like to see more. I think that just talking about bicycle routes in relation to the streets and roadways is limiting. And, I mean, it needs to dovetail. There needs to be specific language that dovetails with these other plans. I'm not familiar with the pedestrian plan or the trails plan, but these off-street connectors, I'm a big proponent of. I've ridden my bike all over the United States. It's all about the off-street connectors, the multi-use pass. It's all about that. Because, I mean, people aren't going to bike if they feel unsafe on the road. And even with bike lanes, it's definitely an improvement, but it's still scary. And with these off-street routes, it's more aesthetically pleasing, it's quieter, it goes through wooded areas, it's the way to go, and it's every other place in the United States that has comprehensive plans, they have these, and they work. So, yeah, and I understand the concern also about places that the city does not own, but the assets that the city does own, we need to search those out, find those, and connect those with streets for pedestrian and cyclist use. I would also mention 13th Street as it goes over Silver Creek, another pedestrian bridge, because there's Penny Park right there, there's Agape School, there's Food Basket, Golf Park, all connected, that would nullify 180 on the other side, which is a popular way to travel to those destinations. I know Safe Routes to School is not necessarily in the scope of this particular plan, but again, it's about dovetailing. Safe Routes to School, it's a 1 mile radius is considered the jurisdiction of Safe Routes to School from a school. So this is a small scale route system, and that needs to dovetail with this larger route system. And there needs to be some sort of apparatus that helps that dovetailing between these various plans, pedestrian plan, Safe Routes to School plan, which it would be awesome if these various councils could adopt a Safe Routes to School plan for our area as well. They need to dovetail. There needs to be I don't know how many meetings we have to go to get all this to go together, but whatever it takes, I guess. Let's see. Yeah, and then I guess I'll just end, everybody get on your bike and go check it out. You got to feel it to really know some of these issues. So get on your bike and just get out there. I think this is what this is really about, is encouraging more of our citizens, of our children, parents, kids, to get on their bike, because it makes sense in so many ways. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Yeah, it's the lawyer.
I guess it's just open. Good evening, Commissioners, and congratulations to the new Vice Chairman. My name is Daniel Dietzel. I'm a local business owner. I've lived here for 11 years, the last 10 continuously. I have 25 years of cycling experience and riding on roads, the first 10 of which I didn't own a car. It was probably my primary means of transportation. If I couldn't get a ride somewhere, I rode my bike there. I didn't walk, I didn't ride the bus. I got around everywhere in Tucson, where I grew up, on my bicycle, including to and from school, high school, the last 3 years. So, and then since then I've had 15 years of experience, I guess since then, here in Silver City and in Albuquerque. I don't have too much to compare it to besides those two cities as far as long-term riding, but I would like to point out that there are some things in Tucson that could make a difference and are improvements on what we have here. And Tucson has consistently won awards or been at the top of the rankings of bike-friendly cities. Although if you live there, I was surprised when I heard that, but I guess it's better than the average, and it's a lot better than some places. Some things they have there that are very minor and that could be implemented here are four-way stop signs on bike routes. You know, when you make a bike route attractive to cyclists, it's sometimes a shortcut, and it becomes attractive also to cars as a shortcut to where they're going, especially if the other traffic is heavy and congestion forces them off into there. So four-way stop signs are preferable to two-way stop signs in front of cyclists, in my experience, and that's just one thing to consider. Another thing are bike lanes are great, but then you need left turn bike lanes as well. This is something that they have a lot of in Tucson. When there is a left-hand turn lane and a cyclist has to get into the left-hand turn lane to turn left, you can merge with traffic into the left-hand turn lane, or you can have a separate bike lane there, offset to the right of the cars turning left, and then that turns you directly into the bike lane, hopefully a bike lane going into the street that you're turning onto. And that's something that is pretty easy to do if you have the space, and it's certainly something that is, I would say, best practices if you can't have separate routes for cyclists. A big thing around here that I've seen that is very detrimental to cycling is there's a lack of either equal paving or equal maintenance on all of the existing bike lanes. Either they're not swept up to the same standards or as often, and certainly it's not as big of an issue to people when they're driving by the bike lane. It may look clear, but there may be broken glass, dirt, gravel that's dangerous, that will cause you flats, that will cause you to lose control and possibly crash. It's been a big problem inside city streets, and obviously out into the county. The highway maintenance, I've noticed, ignores the shoulders, and that's not your problem maybe, but it is something that could be in a plan and could be administratively pushed on the city as far as, are you going to maintain these bike lanes with an equal level of pavement so that there aren't cracks, there aren't potholes, and there isn't two grades of pavement like there is out here on 180 in front of our meeting here tonight, where the bike lane is pretty rough, and there are seams, and certainly not up to the standard of the lanes of traffic. So just some minor things I'd like to point out about what could be added. I think it's important to know the reason why we're here today to talk to the Planning and Zoning Commission, and why it's important what you recommend in this master plan, and why it's important that we implement it. There have been local cyclists killed. I remember when I moved here in 1999, I did work at Gila Hike and Bike, where Mr. Teagarden also worked at that time. And I remember a gentleman who came in the store quite often. It seemed like he was disabled or on some sort of disability, but he was able to ride his bike. He didn't seem to have a lot else to do. He was run over and killed where the shoe department is now when somebody T-boned him, basically. They passed him and then turned right in front of him as he was going down that hill. He, I believe, went under their car and was hauled out of there in an ambulance, was in a coma for a while, I heard, several weeks, until he finally died. That gentleman was issued a citation by the police department at that time for riding on the shoulder. At that time, it was not a bike lane, and it is technically illegal in New Mexico to ride on the shoulder of a highway. He should have, according to the police officer, been riding in the lane instead of riding in the shoulder, and he was, I guess they dropped the ticket because he died. But since then, in '99, I can't see of any improvements except maybe the bike lane on 180 in between New Mexico 15 and Hudson Street. That is an improvement and a big help in cycling around here. But the only other improvements have been possibly slight upgrades to existing shoulders and labeling them bike lanes and sharrows. But as far as anything substantial, adding major accommodations for cycling, nothing has changed. And we're still just as dangerous a community as we were back then when that gentleman was killed. I myself, for the first 20 years, was never hit by a car until about 5 years ago. I was run over here in Grant County, about a quarter mile from the city limits, going up from Tyrone on Highway 90. I was hit from behind at about 55 miles an hour by a woman who had come off the road, was actually riding on the shoulder, and I was riding on the shoulder, I guess illegally, but had I been legally riding in the roadway, I possibly would have been killed, I think. And the reason I was doing that was because that shoulder, I wasn't riding at the far right of the shoulder, because that shoulder is terrible. It is full of glass. It is rough. I'm tired at that point. At that point, I was tired. I wanted to get home. I was riding a little bit to the right of the white line, far enough that anybody driving in the lane could have cleared me, but she came over a little bit, hit me in that section. But I was trying to stay on the clean pavement, and I was trying to get home and enjoy a nice bike ride up until that point. So I have a lot at stake, I found out. And then that wasn't in city limits, but the quarter mile up to the city limits sign is exactly where a family man here, a guy named Dan Potts, was hit and killed, going the same way as I was. And now we memorialize one of the stages of the Tour of the Gila for him. But there is some very serious consequences to all of this. And I appreciate what everybody's done with the master plan. I think it's all pretty helpful. I think it is obviously a first step, and I think it will improve my life as a commuter, but it is a far step short of something that we would want to send our children out into, because I think that while these are improvements for children to ride on the streets, they're going to get chewed up and spit out on our streets with the drivers the way they are. They're not really paying attention to cyclists at this point. So everything we're doing is making it a little bit safer for the kids that do try and ride on our streets, and all of the adults and people that rely on a bicycle for transportation and recreation and fitness to do. The last thing I want to mention is that the stretch between of 180 between Juniper and 14th there that it's already been mentioned is a death trap basically right now. It is unacceptable for a cycling master plan, and I don't want to hopefully offend anybody, but it's unacceptable for a master plan to recommend that people stay away from that intersection and just give up on it. It is my main route to work. It is my only route to work. When I commute by bicycle, I ride that route. I have to ride that route because it's in between my house and my work. I don't have a way around it. I make do with what it is, but it is in fact a death trap. There is no accommodation for cyclists, and worse than that, there are accommodations for cyclists that just dump you out into the middle of lanes with traffic trying to get around you at that point. I would hopefully the master plan could include a plan for that particular stretch of road. I could think of a lot of ways to improve it with very minor impact to traffic that would make it much safer for bicyclists with just paint. You could paint lanes differently than they are now, and we could present that to the city council. They could present that to DOT, but something needs to be done to show that there are ways to improve that people aren't going to be hurt and hopefully not seriously hurt there. And if you want to take out just the medians, I think you've got a lot of room to work with, and you could improve things quite a bit there. So, I'm open to talk to anybody, but I think without a plan for that stretch of road, it's not a master plan by any means. And as far as going around it, the route that Mr. Coase mentioned for going around it through the parking lot, up the hill, through the dirt, I do use that on the way back from work because it avoids several left turns, it avoids that uphill. It is illegal probably to avoid the traffic signal there. You're going through a parking lot to avoid that light. It is very dangerous to jump curbs, ride on dirt, ride through that parking lot with several lanes of people coming in and out of that parking lot without any real traffic control in that parking lot. So that's not a viable option. It is the best thing to do when you're in a bad situation sometimes, but it does not reflect my point of view, which is a commuter. I have a right to get from point A to point B on the road. I have a right to get there quickly, and I may not want to detour on a bike route, even though it's a nicer, safer bike route, because it's going to take me time, because it's going to go up a hill that I don't want to go up. I'm going to go the shortest, easiest way to go, unless I'm truly in fear of getting killed. And that's my limiting factor. And I wish that wasn't the limiting factor on riding on our streets here in town, but in particular, that stretch of road, I think it is for me. So, thank you for the time.
Thank you, Mr. Diesel. You had brought up a point that you mentioned Tucson. Now, I don't know if any of our, when we go to create bike lanes, if any of them will ever do where they actually go from the right over to the left. But don't they in Tucson also paint those bright green in a lot of spots so that it's very obvious that that bike lane at that point?
Bike parks.
Yeah.
They started doing that. That's, that's fine. I don't think anybody really, just because you're in the green part, going in front of a car, I don't think people are going to slam on the brakes for you. I think as a cyclist, you're still at the mercy of traffic, and you're going to have to look over your shoulder before you merge over to the left turn lane. But what you don't want to be is waiting for that left turn lane, like I do on 180, turning left to go down 90, to go south on 90. You have to jump into the turn lane with the cars. You have to merge not only across those two lanes of traffic going straight, but you have to jump then into the left-hand turn lane, and you're sitting there right behind these other cars who are turning left, and while these other cars are trying to either turn left or go straight, and it's bad for visibility, it's bad for the drivers that can't see you until you pop out from behind their car, and what you really want is a place to rest there and sit there while the light changes until you can get across the intersection is what I think. The one example in Tucson, besides the separate bike paths that they've been building, which are great, and are pretty new, is Mountain Avenue, which is a major feeder into the University of Arizona. That's a large bike lane, wide enough for two bikes next to it, and they have a separation, a rumble strip, I guess, with plastic posts in there separating that bike lane from the actual traffic lanes. And that is highly used. It's pretty darn safe. And it gets a lot of people to and from places on their bicycle. And I would think that's the way to go if you want to look at a model of the street that can accommodate bicyclists and cars at the same time.
Anyone else?
Hello, good evening. My name's Jamie Thompson. I've been riding bikes with kids forever. It seems like my main interest in this is to make sure that the kids that I see, and Andrew's part of that program as well, are as accommodated as possible. It turns out that a lot of when I first started the program, we worked with the juvenile probation and parole, and now last year we were doing after-school programming. Most of the kids were special ed or had behavioral problems. A lot of them had absolutely no parental involvement, and so what I would like to see in a bicycle master plan is something that can somehow accommodate those kids and the challenges that they face. At the end of the day, that's our main concern, is we don't want those kids getting hit. We don't want anybody getting hit, but that's a tragedy that we just can't handle. It sounds like a lot of our fight is going to be with the city council. I had no idea. I was on the council. I don't know when it was that they made the recommendation that this master plan could only involve streets. And it makes for some contradictions within the draft, because it seems like we're comfortable making recommendations about education or bike racks. Bike racks are not hopefully on the street. But we're not comfortable making recommendations about other sorts of facilities that are off streets. And this is a real shame, because it's constricting a lot of possibilities. And it seems to me, I don't know anything about this, but it seems to me with the planning document, you want to have all your possibilities presented to you so that you can make the most informed decisions. When we went to Santa Fe to look at the development of the master plan that they did there, which is, by the way, a spectacular plan. One of the most effective facilities were areas that allowed for bridging between neighborhoods, connectors, and often those were through city parks, which again are not streets. And it seems like we have, even on this plan, some contradictions. I'm not really sure, but it seems to me that if the plan, if I read that right, about Little Walnut, Andrew asked about this too, if there's an extension of Little Walnut up to Kane Street, then it's my understanding, and I could be absolutely wrong on this too, that the town doesn't have the right-of-ways for an expansion on that road. So there is some talk about, even in the general way of private property. I can see the reluctance to talk about private property, but in general language, I think that the master plan should have something. But it sounds like this isn't the right place for that. It's something that we'll have to discuss with council. If we're going to restrict ourselves to existing roadways, one of the most, putting routes, it's kind of a trivial exercise if our main goal is to make the safety, increase the safety overall. The main problem with safety is traffic congestion and aggression. And the routes aren't going to change that. We're going to need to really be thinking about traffic calming facilities. And I don't know where that was mentioned, and we need to spend quite a bit of time thinking about that. We also need to think about how road painting design is developed. Alabama, we talked to you guys 5 months ago about Alabama. There have been improvements in putting more stop signs. That's great, but the way that the painting is designed for a naive cyclist or for a parent with their kids or whatever, they're probably going to end up going the wrong way on the shoulder. It has actually increased risk. And so part of the master plan is going to have to be dealing with how painting design works. It's going to have to look at Sharrows a little bit more. We've talked to Alex Brown and Peter Pena about Sharrows, and this plan, as far as the restrictions on where we can put Sharrows, is a step back, because they agreed, like Alabama, if it doesn't have, with the existing painting design, without Sharrows on there, we're asking for a crash. But Alabama's not on the list as one of the routes, and so we're stuck now in a pretty funny position, because we want to fix a problem, but we can't, because the draft says that might not be the best idea. The plan spent quite a bit of time on bike lanes, and it's uncomfortable for us who were listed on it, because we're trying to accommodate a full range of cyclists, and so it makes it appear that we're full-blown proponents of bike lanes. Bike lanes have their place, but they have to be really carefully thought out. All the bike lanes that we have in Silver City are poorly designed. You have to accommodate for the possibility that signage is going to disappear, And if that happens, are you going to get the sorts of behaviors that will increase the likelihood of crashes? And so we need to be thinking about that. As far as the traffic, this is the last thing, sorry this is taking so long. The last thing, if we can only restrict our discussion to existing roadways, one of the possible ways of calming traffic, an interesting possibility that we've seen in Albuquerque on Silver Street, curiously enough, because I think this is something that should happen on Silver Street, is that they created a pedestrian boulevard. And it already exists as a pedestrian boulevard in a sense. You see most of the kids, it's a major thoroughfare for the middle school and for the high school and for Stout Elementary. But it's a through street. That's an area that we really have to concentrate on, because that's also where I believe a lot of the pedestrian crash data is, the problems is on 180 right around Silver Street, and that needs to be fixed. We've presented a couple of possibilities that we think is intuitive. The possibility that I like the most is trying to make a pedestrian boulevard out of Silver Street. The main purpose of these pedestrian and bicycle bridges is to make it just incrementally a little bit easier to ride your bike than to drive. And that allows more cyclists. It's a way to get more people on bikes. And if we're interested in improving the safety of cyclists, the number one variable is how many cyclists are out there. If cyclists are rare, kids are in danger. That's the simple fact. And so anything that we can do to increase the number of cyclists, the safer it is for children. And sometimes that will mean that we have to make difficult political decisions. A planning document should support decision makers in making those difficult decisions. And I hope that the next phase of the draft can do that a little bit more. I've got a whole bunch of comments that came off of the listserv that we have with the cyclists in the community. That's about 200. Has about 200 members on it, and I think I've sent it to you, Jim. But I'll send you another one. I've worked on it again. And then I'll send it to you guys too. I sent one to Nick, and it was in pretty bad shape, so it's a little bit better now. That's it. Yeah, and it's a real shame about having to restrict the entire discussion to the roadways, because bicycling is much more comprehensive than that. Kids are having to learn in the schools. We need to have the town talking with the schools. They have to happen, and schools are not existing roads. So that's a fundamental problem right there. I'm glad I heard that's what has restricted this from being a much better planning document. And now we can focus our efforts on the council. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Annie Crawford. I've had a bike shop since 1999 on Bullard Street, and I've been a cyclist since 1968. And I'm your designated vehicular cyclist. And thank you, Jim, for your coverage of the philosophy. It's more of a philosophy than a theory. A vehicular cyclist operates on the road exactly the way an automobile driver does. Obeys all the same rules, tries to be predictable the way automobiles do, because that's how we can all work together safely on the road. It's the only way we can work together safely. You can't have two sets of rules and have people be predictable and know what people are going to do. bike lanes create conflicts at every intersection. The bike lanes put the cyclist on the right-hand side of the road, and usually they're going straight, and if an automobile wants to turn right, they're crossing over the cyclist's path, and it's not safe. And if the cyclist wants to turn left, they have to leave the bike lane, and if the motorist is expecting the cyclist to stay in the bike lane, then they're surprised, and it's a dangerous situation. Pope Street is a great example. If you saw those dotted lines and everything, and there's dotted lines, and then the bike lane goes straight, nobody goes straight there. Everybody either turns right or left. And the bikes don't know what to do, the cars don't know what to do. So I believe Jim said it can be confusing. It definitely can be confusing. The vehicle code, as Mr. Dietzel mentioned, says that bikes are not to use the shoulder. They are to be in the traffic lane. Everybody knows it's crazy to not ever use the shoulder if you're on a bike. But being farther to the right makes you less visible. And the two men that Mr. Dietzel mentioned who were killed were both very far to the right. And I don't know if visibility was a factor in Mr. Pott's death. I'm pretty sure it was a factor in Fred's death. Somebody turned right on top of him. So it's safer to be in the lane because you're visible. What I do is I take the lane whenever I can. I use a mirror, and I stay in the lane until I know that I've been seen because the motorist is moving. And when the motorist moves, so do I. If the motorist doesn't move, I have a place to go. And I dive off the road out of the way. I don't like bike lanes because they make the road more dangerous. I don't want to deny people bike lanes who want to have them, but it's still going to bother me because designating a bike lane means motorists are going to expect me to use it whether I want to or not, and they're going to resent me being in the lane where I feel safer. Hudson is terrible. It was better before it had a bike lane. I could take the lane. It was my right. I knew it, and I didn't feel like I was going to be targeted for doing that. Now that there's a bike lane, I think other users are going to be angry at me if I get out in the lane where I feel safer. Sharrows are less of an issue because they don't tell me that I need to be over on the right. They tell me and tell everyone that I have the right to the whole road. But if some roads have sharrows and others do not, maybe people are going to think that I'm supposed to be on the road with the sharrows and not on all the other roads. And that's not right. So equality of users really is the issue. Jim, you did pretty good covering the vehicular cycling philosophy. But it's not so much that vehicular cyclists don't see the need for bicycle facilities as that they see the conflicts that are created by bicycling facilities. Even off-street facilities have to cross streets, and that's where the conflicts occur. So really the only component of this plan that I think is going to achieve the stated goal of improving cyclist safety is the education component. And I would like to see as much emphasis as possible put on that. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? I've been taking notes. You guys have wonderful points, brought up a lot of things I had not thought about, so I really, really want to thank you for coming and sharing and appreciating that the cities was given a designated by the city council what they could and could not do or to do, and of course their hands are a little bit tied by that, and that you appreciate that and realize that maybe your next stop for some of your concerns needs to be the city council, who has the ability to make those changes. And I guess you had some questions probably too, so Mr. Coates, I bet we have a few more questions and things for you.
I guess I get to be the lucky guy.
Yes, you get these first.
Okay. Gosh, thanks. I guess in listening to the whole presentation, there were a few thoughts that I had, and maybe I should do the specific stuff first and then move on to sort of the general thoughts. When you were talking about Silver Street and the opportunities on Silver Street, I always get really reluctant when I hear people talk about solving problems by eliminating on-street parking, because, my experiences personally, and certainly the research and the reading that I've done, my understanding of the latest thought on the situation is that, generally speaking, that will make problems worse because it widens people's perception of a street width and causes people to drive at faster speeds. Here, mostly referring, obviously, to motorists and not cyclists. So I'm just sort of wondering, what are the opportunities there? For instance, what is the traffic lane width that we're looking at on Silver Street? Are we talking about maintaining a 12-foot traffic lane there, or are we talking about trimming that down? What are our parameters?
Right now, the proposal would be either no on-street parking so that you'd have an area for a bike lane, or maintain it as a shared roadway. My understanding, and I haven't been out with a measuring tool, but this is from discussions with other town employees, that the pushback from taking away the on-street parking would be great. And that with on-street parking, with a 5-foot bike lane outside of that on-street parking, you would have not enough room for the 2 lanes for vehicles or motorists. So that was where that bouncing back and forth between should there be parking or should there not be parking comes from. I don't have a solution. I only have people telling me what they would like.
I'm just curious, though, when we're saying there's not enough room for cars, we're saying even if we took it down to a 10-foot traffic lane or a 9-foot?
I don't know.
Okay.
I haven't measured it. This is, I would say, from hearsay expert opinions.
Well, that's because when I hear people say things like that, I always, sort of the AASHTO standard is the 12-foot traffic lane. And I would even argue it when it comes to Hudson Street and when it comes to Silver Heights. But when you get to a really minor street in terms of, the arterial and collector system in the town of Silver City, Silver Street's not a major street in terms of vehicular traffic. And so I'd really question, for that matter, I even question the need for, the double yellow line that runs up the middle of it. I know we like that because it screams, we paint these and we're maintaining things and these lines are pretty. But I think we're putting them in places where we don't really need them, and we're sending kind of the wrong message about, what that street is by doing that. And if we're going to talk about doing a shared street, for instance, if we decide that's our solution, I would suggest that we should look at doing something very different in terms of how we're marking that pavement from what we're doing today. Does that make sense?
Sure.
Okay. Speaking of pavement markings, you showed all those pretty pictures of College Avenue, Pope Street and the bike lanes on Pope Street, except for the one really big problem intersection in that system was when you get down to College Avenue, and a couple of the speakers have talked about it. And I think, actually, Annie makes some really good points in terms of the major streets and whether we want to have bike lanes there or not. But certainly, either we need to develop a solution for the bike lane as we get to College Avenue that reflects what people do, or we should stripe it in a way that's consistent with everywhere else. One of those two things. Because what it does now is just weird. And it doesn't make any sense at all if you're a cyclist. It's sort of just, because of the way that the lanes split.
It's confusing.
It is. It's very confusing, and it's not well designed, and that's something that, regardless of what direction we go with it, it needs to be addressed, and I hope that that'll be something that makes it into the plan. Whatever that recommendation is, I would hope it's either, really look at encouraging, doing markings for cyclists and bike lanes that reflect what they're actually going to want to do, or doing something that is always consistent at every intersection, regardless of whether that makes sense or not. And then, I guess, my last thing is what I'd like to see out of a plan like this, more than anything else. And Dan talked about Tucson and some of their solutions. Of course, I went to university in Tucson. And one of the things that impressed me most is that system of bikeways that is completely separate, and it's actually kind of a mirror of the arterial traffic system for cars. There's like a completely separate arterial system for bikes that has dedicated signals for bikes where it crosses the arterials for cars. And Mountain Avenue, which he mentioned, is the nicest example in terms of specialized pavement and, landscaping, lighting, the whole 9 yards. But many of their other bikeways are much simpler in terms of the length of them. It's just those special signals in those interfaces. They don't, for instance, where the street crosses the major streets, cars are not allowed to go straight through those signals. They have to make a right turn there, and only bikes are allowed to go, which helps solve some of those problems. And obviously, the scale is somewhat different. But when I look at Silver Street in particular, since Silver City is longer than it is wide, and there's so many important things that are up kind of at the north end in terms of the high school and the middle school and Stout, the fields, the pool, it seems like that section of Silver Street is a really good opportunity, not tomorrow or next year, but 5 or 10 years down the road, to work towards doing something like that there, and figuring out then how that interfaces with the rest of the town. Maybe when it gets down to 180, it feeds into the Greenway and then into downtown that way. It might be a possibility. But I think making some provision and saying, in the long term, this is something we really, really want to work towards is important in this plan. I appreciate focusing on the things that are doable now, but I think there do need to be some elements of sort of larger vision that we can work towards over time.
Any other questions from any other commissioner? I'd like to reiterate what you said about consistency. I think whatever is done for the sake of the people in the cars, you can't expect them to educate themselves. They're not going to. And they'll get used to a pattern. And if you have different types of patterns at different intersections, that's going to create, real safety problem. So you do have to have whatever you decide to do with the bikes at the intersections. If it's consistent at all of the intersections, that would really be helpful, I think. I love the fact that they just seem simple and small, but at 90 and 180, they just put the traffic light where it has an arrow. Well, because people always turn left when they're not supposed to turn left. And it's just one of those little reminders to the people in cars, this is not going straight now, I'm not, that seems like a little thing, but the fact that people always turn left where they're not supposed to there is so hazardous. And so just consistency would really be key so that people get used to, here's what happens at major intersections with bicycles and pedestrians.
Right. And, part of the problem with that is completely separate from the bike issue is that we are not consistent in terms of how we treat intersections for cars in Silver City.
Absolutely true.
Where, in most places, when you come to an intersection that's signalized, you know what the structure of the lanes is going to be. In Silver City, if you're going one direction on Swan Street, it does something completely different than if you're coming the other direction. And maybe that's okay, or maybe it has been okay. Perhaps we're getting to the point in the growth of the community where, and especially given that we have so many tourists and visitors to our community, maybe we need to start thinking about being more consistent in terms of intersection design and the things that we do there. Just a suggestion.
Just in response to your comment about consistency, that's one of the reasons why AASHTO standards are primarily the overriding standard to be used, is because they do provide some consistency not only for here in the design and implementation, but also across the country. I mean, that is the one standard that seems to be used most by those who design bicycle facilities, pedestrian or bicycle facilities. They have the guide that people use. Hopefully that will provide that consistency that we're looking at without having to say, well, we've got to be consistent here, we've got to be consistent. Just the consistency is in the standard. And Mr. Lawson, I'm sorry I couldn't remember your name. Please forgive me.
Madam Chair, if I could add one more thing. Getting back to Tucson and things that they pioneered, I have long wondered, and I know that there aren't any in New Mexico, at least that I'm aware of, but what they used to call hawk signals, and what now apparently AASHTO calls the pedestrian hybrid beacon. But they're basically the pedestrian and bike actuated traffic signals that are only for pedestrians and bikes. So they'll be, away from where the traffic signals are for cars, and it's just like there'll be a crosswalk there. Imagine exactly what we have in front of the post office on Hudson Street, except there's a button that you push there that has a light that comes on that stops traffic and allows you to cross. And I think, given that Silver City is restricted in terms of we don't have redundant arterials. Like, everything runs down Hudson Street and Silver Heights and Silver City. And because of that, there's sort of continuous rivers of traffic. And I think that there are a few select places that we should really, really lobby the transportation department in the long term to look at doing some of those things, because I think going forward that's really gonna make some of these other things fall into place. Because without that, we are restricted to pushing bike traffic, for instance, that wants to get from, the swimming pool or the high school, and they want to get downtown. We have to push them into that Swan Street intersection, and that's a lot of traffic. And I don't know that that's necessarily the smartest thing to do. If we had some other way for them to get across the river there without having to deal with a bunch of cars in a safe way, I think that would probably be a really good thing. And I think that's a circumstance that, while it may not be unique to Silver City, definitely is a little different for us than it is for a lot of other towns across the state. And maybe we should be the people that sort of take the lead. But it is an AASHTO standard. Like, that's a thing that's in the book. So it shouldn't be that hard to convince the engineers that maybe they could look at it.
I'm not disagreeing with you at all, because it's something that we included as a recommendation in the pedestrian plan, especially between Swan and the big intersection. It is in the AASHTO book. There's also something called the manual for, anyway, it's signalization and signage manual for transportation engineers. And it talks in there about warrants, and not like warrants of arrest, but warrants as in the traffic here warrants such and such, and the traffic here warrants something else. And it's based on traffic counts and pedestrian counts and bicycle counts. And we keep running into the problem where you don't have enough pedestrians crossing at this place because nobody wants to go there. So, it's where do you get started? Getting people there and getting them used to crossing there before there's a signal so that it will warrant there being a signal? Or so I agree that those hawk signals would be wonderful to have scattered in strategic places throughout those two rivers. So, thank you for bringing that up.
All right, I guess then, in conclusion, I just want to say thank you again for coming, and I think what I'm hearing in general, a lot of different comments from a lot of different angles, but that people appreciate the work that's being done toward this, but are frustrated that it's not enough what we really need for the future of the biking and walking community, and really promotion of health, promotion of safety for our children, et cetera, in the town. And that maybe the city council hopefully might consider expanding on what they're looking at doing. Being a bicyclist myself, this has been near and dear to my heart for all of our presentations. This is what I look most forward to. And I think after hearing a lot of what you said, and I got so many ideas and I wrote so many of them down, that what I would like to do is make up my own presentation that I would like to take to city council, present kind of an overview of what I heard here tonight and what some of the concerns are, and at least give that input back to them, and maybe if they hear it enough, maybe they will make some adjustments to that. So I don't want you to go away thinking that this is all there is and that that's the final thing. We will try and take this to the next step, and we really, really appreciate everything you said tonight. So. All right. Are there any reports from staff? No. Okay. Reports from commission?
Not a report, but I would like to thank all of the members of the biking community who came out this evening, and whoever got the word to them.
Thank you.
And I guess it wouldn't be a P&Z Commission meeting if I didn't have a report. First, I guess that thanks are the correct sentiment to express to the Commission for electing me vice chair in my absence, I think. So, thank you, I think.
Thank you.
Moving on from that, just putting on my other hat as Main Street manager, as I often do in these things. Many of you will be familiar with the Downtown Action Plan. That was an 18-month process that Silver City went through a couple years ago to kind of create a master plan for our downtown. One of the things that suggested doing is creating what's called a metropolitan redevelopment area for the center of our community. And that comes from some state law that's on the books called the Metropolitan Redevelopment Code. But long story short, by making downtown Silver City a metropolitan redevelopment area, it will give us access as a community to some tools that we wouldn't otherwise have to make projects happen, to do things in downtown. And so we're beginning that effort to do that at the council meeting next Tuesday in this very room at 6 p.m. This will be a continuation of a hearing that began last month. And we'll be talking about the boundary and why we want to do this and taking the first step in that process. Should the council choose to establish a boundary and do this resolution establishing the area, then in January, then more than likely we'd come back with an actual plan that would be based on the Downtown Action Plan to actually be able to make things happen. But this is a really important toolkit, and I know that folks may have read about it in the paper, they may have seen it on TV. If they're seeing this, they more than likely did see that council meeting. But we really appreciate the support, or if you're just interested in what that would do for the community. Again, that's next Tuesday. That's the 11th of December. The 11th of December in this room.
Anything else from Commission? Anything, there's also time for community input if somebody wanted to speak about something not to do with the forum tonight. If there's anybody here to talk about anything else? Okay. All right.
Would we move to adjourn?
I haven't seen you moving in a second there. Okay, all in favor of adjournment?
Aye.
All opposed?